What's happening, FC Cincinnati fans? We are live here at CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com for another exciting edition of our podcast. Episode 44 coming at you this week. I'm Subes. Glad to be with you. We've got a great episode in store for you this evening. We're going to be visiting with Rich Neumann, the former president of the Cincinnati Silverbacks. We're going to do some old school soccer chat tonight. Go back to the mid-'90s to talk about the NPSL and the Cincinnati Silverbacks. Will be joining him in about 10 minutes or so. Of course, we'd love to hear from you fans. You can get in touch with us via Twitter at Cincy Soccer Talk, via email, cincysoccertalk@spnt.tv. And our main man, Boston, is waiting to take your calls, 513-399-KICK. It's 513-399-KICK. Captains. Introducing something new this week. Jesse Gill is the captain of our episode tonight. Find out how you can become a captain of Cincinnati Soccer Talk by logging on to CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/support. Jesse, we appreciate your support and your contribution to our campaign. Again, to support Cincinnati Soccer Talk and to become a captain, CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/support. Let's welcome in the first of the Weigel twins, Brad Weigel. Welcome back to the show, my man. You're muted, so we can't hear you. There we go. It's like we've never done this before.
Sorry, man. I gotta grow up and realize what I'm doing here. No, man. I'm just. I guess I'm still not over the loss from Saturday or Sunday from the Spurs to your Red Devils, I guess. But doing all right and ready to be back in it. Talk some Silverbacks tonight.
For those of you watching the live stream, you can see I am wearing my beautiful Manchester United kit just for Brad, since my Red Devils did knock off Spurs on Sunday. We finally won a game that was of importance.
How'd they do today?
They didn't play.
Wow.
They play tomorrow.
Oh.
Yeah. Nice try, though. Okay. That is the voice of Brian Weigel. Welcome back to the show, Brian. How have you been?
Wonderful. Got nice little tan, good complexion from Florida. So missed last week's show, but had a great time down there and just ready for this offseason. And I swear to God, if I don't get a player announcement in the next week, I might go crazy.
Yeah,
I want to be proven right on one of these big boards, by the way.
Hey, you're doing a good job with those. Check those out over at CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com. You've done wingers, you've done forwards, and central midfielders. What's next? What position group is next?
I think it's going to have to be wing backs because center backs, I think we're pretty set there. I might have one or two names that people can take a look at, and goalkeepers. We might throw center backs and goalkeepers together because those situations are pretty solid. But yeah, definitely wing backs because I think between those two positions, a holding midfielder and a striker, I think those are the four big spends we got to do this offseason.
And last but not least, it's good to welcome our main man, Josef Sagai, back to the program. It has been a real long time since Josef has been on the show. What's up, man? How you been?
I've been good. Missing the show. Missing getting involved with a lot of the fun stuff that's been going on over the past couple of weeks, months. But I'm back in full force and ready to talk some soccer. Trust.
Good. I'm glad to have you back. I don't know if the Cincinnati Silverbacks were around back in the day when you were a wee toddler in the mid-'90s. You're making me feel kind of old here, Josef, not going to lie.
I was like 8.
Oh, that's great. So we're going to talk Cincinnati Silverbacks here in just a moment with Rich Neumann, former president of the club. That's coming up here in a couple minutes. But before we can do that, let's get to some of the FC Cincinnati news, shall we? Last week, the front office staff, Jeff Birding and company, went down to Tampa for the winter meetings. And that's all I got. That's the only news we got from FC Cincinnati, unless you can think of the other thing. Jeff Birding did attend MLS Cup, where we were kind of hinted at maybe he could have been a guest of Don Garber's at the final, but that has not been confirmed. But it was a good week for MLS Cup, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well.
I think Don Garber tweeted out that he was with some high-profile potential expansion franchises at the MLS Cup. So that was pretty neat to say. And the picture Jeff tweeted out looked awful lot like he was in a box. So
it did, but has not been confirmed. So we don't want to jump to any conclusions. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. Either way, Hopefully Jeff stayed warm up in Toronto because it looked frigid.
Yeah, and the game wasn't the most beautiful games either, which I guess is indicative of both those two teams that played in it. But glad to have our brass out there trying to put the word out for FC Cincinnati, and I appreciate him making the flight. Hopefully, grab some poutine while he's up there.
You guys and poutine. That's a common theme here.
So good, dude. When you get good poutine, man, Senate does wonderful things.
All right. Well, let's talk a little Cincinnati Silverbacks, shall we? I remember back in the day when I heard that they were going to be having an indoor soccer team in Cincinnati. It was a big deal for me. One, growing up, I didn't get a chance to watch a lot of soccer on TV because soccer just wasn't on TV as much as it is now, believe it or not, back in the mid-'90s. And so when they announced that there would be a new professional soccer team in town, I was super excited to get the chance to watch, to see professional soccer being played in city. I was just so pumped, and I kept begging my dad. I was like, Dad, we've got to get tickets to the opening game. And he surprised me with them. It was a big deal. And so I'm proud to say I was at the very first Cincinnati Silverbacks game at the Gardens,
Wow.
the old Cincinnati Gardens. Rest in peace. We missed that place. But that's my first memory of the Silverbacks. What is your first memory of the Silverbacks, Brad?
Man, I have to say, I can't remember if I went to the Gardens or not, but I definitely remember it down at the Crown Arena at the time, and when they would, just like Xavier games, the players would throw balls into the crowd. I just remember it was just such a neat thing to watch, and still one of my favorite things ever. One of my favorite sports to watch is indoor soccer, strictly just due to the speed. I mean, you just hockey is the closest thing you can compare it to, but soccer that fast, a lot of goals. Those are just some of the coolest things that I remember.
What about you, Bri?
I'll tell you what, man. Love that they played music during the games, which is awesome. And then they had timeouts, and that was cool. And then I always dug when they did like t-shirt cams and stuff with Cotton Eye Joe, because that was my jam back in the day. So I was like a 13, 14-year-old. Yeah, Cotton Eye Joe. So I'm probably losing my street cred, but
did you have any in the first place?
Well, I was gonna say Yosef has the flat bill. I got the curve bill, so I think I'm already out of there.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool seeing a soccer field with a 3-point line. That was. I mean, it wasn't was it a 3-pointer? I think it was maybe a 2-pointer.
You had two. You had 1, 2, and 3s. I think one
3-pointer half line.
No, it ended up originally it was like a yellow line. The only reason I know this because I went back and watched a couple games, and it was like yellow line. Then I think they switched it to the arc. And if you scored a goal during the regular run of play, it was like 2 points. If you scored it, I want to say into either a PK or because you had penalties back then too, so you had to go to the penalty box, kind of like a power play, and you would get 1 point for a power play goal.
Yeah, I do remember the penalties. One other memory I do have, I think this was the second game I attended. It was at the Cincinnati Gardens. We were sitting there was like behind the goal, there was like a upper deck in the Gardens. And we were sitting in the front row during pregame warmups. And I was just kind of like looking around the crowd because we had traveled down with a neighbor of ours. And I was trying to find where they were sitting in the stands. So I wasn't really paying attention. And I'm looking around. And then I look down right at the goal, and the next thing I see is a soccer ball flying right at me. I mean, it literally was maybe 2 feet in front of me when it luckily hit the facade right in front of where we were sitting and bounced straight back. But had that been another foot higher, I would have been just tagged right in the chest. That would have been painful because I wasn't paying attention. So that was another thing. If you weren't paying attention, there was the potential for some danger there.
That's not exclusive to Silverbacks games, because I've seen plenty of people getting knocked over at the FC Cincinnati pregame warm-up. So that's kind of fun to watch pregame. It's a good drinking game.
Yeah. Well, but it was a good time. Looking back on some Silverbacks memories, I'm really excited to bring in our guest as well, Rich Neumann. He was the president of the Cincinnati Silverbacks, and he joins us now here on Cincinnati Soccer Talk. Rich, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. This is a real treat and a blast from the past listening to you guys reminisce about the Silverbacks 20 years ago.
Has it really been 20 years ago? Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Oh
Nick.
yeah, 20 years ago. And when I talked to Brad the other day, a little bit about the details for tonight's podcast, that opened up the floodgates for me in terms of soccer memories overall. And I actually started my love affair with soccer. It's almost unimaginable to me, but the first time I kicked a soccer ball was my sophomore year in high school in the fall of 1966. So I just celebrated my 50th anniversary involved in some form or fashion with soccer for almost the entire 50 years.
Wow, that's impressive. Congrats on the anniversary.
And I'm only 49, so I don't know how I managed to get to 50. I did.
That's outstanding. So let's talk a little bit about the beginning stages and how it was even approached to bring indoor professional soccer to Cincinnati. And how did you get involved exactly?
Well, the story really starts a while before the Silverbacks, or at the time the Dayton Dynamo, became part of the conversation. I went through the Ohio University Sports Administration and Facility Management graduate program in 1980 and wound up through another alum being hired to work at Riverfront Coliseum in 1987 for my first tour duty in the building. And one of the first initiatives I was charged with was to explore the possibility of bringing an MISL franchise to Cincinnati. And ownership in the building included Bill DeWitt and Bob Castellini, and they were pretty serious about it. In fact, we hosted an MISL exhibition game with the Cleveland Force that year. And that was really my first exposure to indoor soccer on the professional level. I played some indoor soccer back in Jersey during the winter when it was too cold to play outside, but certainly nothing on the professional level. And although we didn't realize any MISL team at that point, and of course the Cincinnati Kids back in the 70s, Pete Rose was part owner of that franchise, only lasted 1 year playing at the Coliseum, either its first or second year in existence in the, again, original MISL. It convinced me, at least at the time, that it was a great sport, great spectator sport. And of course, I love soccer, so that obviously helped. But when I was approached by Doug Kirchhoffer and his partners, the three original owners of the original iteration of the Cincinnati Cyclones, during their first year playing at the Gardens, about since they were from Knoxville, looking for someone to run their front office for them. And Jerry Robinson, who I'd gotten to know when I was at the Coliseum, the owner of the Gardens, had suggested that Doug approach me. One of Doug's visions at that time, I have to give him credit, was, he literally wanted to take the Cyclones as the foundation, bring in other events, potentially another franchise, wasn't sure what, and ultimately buy the Gardens. And I wasn't sure I wanted to leave my position at the time, athletic director at Anderson High School, but it was too compelling an opportunity to get involved in, at that point, literally the most successful minor league hockey team in the country, with the prospect of buying a building and bringing other franchises. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking about indoor soccer. So in January of '95, when I left Anderson and joined Doug and his partners in the Cyclones, we started hatching our plans about bringing indoor soccer to Cincinnati. And the Dayton Dynamo at the time had been in the the NPSL for quite a while, but weren't doing well. And I bring the name up again and give him the credit. Jerry Robinson had been approached by the owners of the Dynamo about his interest in buying the team. which he didn't have any interest in doing, but suggested that he talk to Doug and me. And that's really what started the ball rolling. So we're talking, spring, summer of 95. And ultimately we reached an agreement to move the Dayton Dynamo down here. And our merchandise manager at the time, I was digging deep into the recesses of my memory bank, but our merchandise director at the time with the Cyclones was a young man named Robert Burnham, and he came up with the Silverbacks nickname. So we cut a deal with the owners of the Dynamo and wound up owning an indoor professional soccer team, and the rest, as they say, is history. So that was how it really evolved from its organic state back in 95.
So 1995, that's pre-MLS. So, at that point in time, we just hosted the World Cup in 94, and then you're transitioning to 95 and the start of 96. I bet that had to be a pretty challenging time just to assemble a team and an organization with teams coming and going and being hatched. So how did you guys get your organization, your team in place, and how did you find it to sign players?
Brad, that's a great question. And having spent the last 30 plus years in professional sports, one of the great myths is that an individual team owner operator can have multiple properties and just overlay inventory onto their existing sales staff. And that's really not the way it works, because you need to have a dedicated front office staff and sales team for each franchise that you might own. And Doug and I realized that, and that's what we did. And it really took a financial commitment for us to do that, because obviously there was going to be duplication and replication with respect to what the Cyclone staff was doing and what the Silverback staff was doing. Now, operationally, we had some overlay. Our mascot, Snowbird, was also a Baxter Silverback. So for those of you who remember our mascot, one same with Silverback and Snowbird. But it was a real fast and furious, let's hire a staff and get this thing rolling. And like any business, it's driven a large part by relationships. So this coach was Gary Hindley, who was a friend of mine from back in Jersey, who was the Cleveland Crunch coach and had a great deal of success there. Gary and I had coached against each other in college back in New Jersey. And, the soccer world really is pretty small. At least back then it was really small in the States. So kind of everybody knew each other, especially in Jersey. And I approached Gary, and he had success and won a championship in Cleveland and was looking for a new opportunity and a chance to build something from the ground up. So he was our first hire. After that, we started looking at local soccer folks and hired Brian Sullivan, who had been the Anderson High School soccer coach, and Randy Hurley, who was the Moeller soccer coach at the time, to help us with the community grassroots movement. And then built from there. Gary was really responsible for the player side, and I was responsible for the business side. Again, it's been a long time since I, thought about a lot of this stuff, although frankly, the success that FC Cincinnati has had in its inaugural season obviously resurrected a lot of those memories about the Silverbacks for me.
Now, I saw you actually had several MLS players, Mark Simpson, Scott Cannon. You even had a guy who actually scored in the final or the first MLS Cup final in Sean Medved. How did that go about? Like when they left the Silverbacks, I assume they were on a 1-year contract, or were they just free to go from the Silverbacks, or did you guys try to lure them, try to sign them to play back in Cincinnati during that first off season?
Again, that's an excellent question. And back in those days, I'm not going to describe it as kind of the wild, wild west, but there were some rules, but there weren't a lot of rules. And our contracts with our players were seasonal contracts. So they were free to go wherever they wanted to go once our season was over. And for those of you who go back that far, there was even at one point an indoor soccer war, so to speak, between the Continental Indoor Soccer League and the NPSL, and even at the very beginning, the MISL, in terms of what made more sense for arenas. Because at the end of the day, it's truly about making money. So when are the most dates available in an arena? They're during the summer. So the Continental Indoor Soccer League played during the summer. The NPSL, the MISL played during the fall and winter. So these players kind of hopscotched around and went different places and picked up a paycheck when they could. And again, as you pointed out, the beginning of the MLS has come a long way, but it's still only 20 years old, 20 plus years old. And one of the things that I often remind myself and others in conversations about the evolution of professional sports leagues, the MLS at this point is about where the NFL was pre-World War II in the 1940s. So not that every league follows every other league's footprint, but, it was a very different time than it is today. And I might add this, and Brad assured me that my rambling was okay, but growing up in Jersey, I also remember, because I lived a stone's throw away from it, going to the Meadowlands to see the original New York Cosmos play in the 70s at the original Giants Stadium, when there were 76,000 people there, and Leroy Neumann was there sketching all the superstars and celebrities coming in to watch those matches. So, obviously not. I don't mean it's just that I'm singularly, able to reminisce about those days, but, soccer has had some fascinating, fitful starts and stops in this country.
One of the things I remember about that first opening night, Rich, was the house was packed. And how did you find, or leading up to that opening game, were you pleased with the response from the city? Were you pleased with how things were going off the field?
Well, the answer was we were thrilled with the sellout. And contrary to some of the things you might see on Wikipedia these days, we didn't really paper the house other than once or twice, as much as it suggests. But my love for soccer notwithstanding, bringing the Silverbacks in was to provide inventory for a building, and that's what drove, your rate of return on your investment. It was simple as that. So we did everything privately, and this is not a knock on anybody or any decision-making process at all, but for those of you who do remember this, when we acquired the Riverfront Coliseum and turned it into the Crown, that was right at the point in time when the half-cent sales tax had been passed to fund Great American Ballpark and Paul Brown Stadium. And our first year down there, we were subjected to not only the demolition of the original walkway between the parking garages at Riverfront Stadium and Riverfront Coliseum, but also the construction of Port Washington Way. So when you bring up the public sector and what was my feeling about what they did for us, they didn't do anything for us. In fact, we did a great favor, I believe, to the city of Cincinnati by acquiring the Coliseum and putting the money into it to renovate it. Because if we had not done that privately, they would have been forced to do something else along with the stadiums. But that to the side, we were thrilled with the response on opening night. The Silverbacks crowds were always passionate, were always exciting. I got a kick out of you saying you almost got wanked by a soccer ball in warm-ups or during the game, because we're always scared to death we were going to get sued by somebody that did get hit like that. It was a situation where the Cyclones were the number one tenant. We knew that going in. They were always going to be that. And then when we moved downtown and had control of that building, we had to be very sensitive to our other partners, the Niederlander organization, in terms of booking family shows and concerts. So we started to lose Saturday night and Friday night dates. And especially for the Silverbacks, which had, it's kind of like minor league baseball, where I spent the last 15 years of my career. It's affordable family entertainment, and it was driven in large part by the soccer community. So weekday night games, we knew we weren't going to draw any families in the dead of winter. So we banked on as much as we could Friday and Saturday night games. And even Saturday afternoon games, really, it's not quite the same. So moving from downtown, from the Gardens to downtown, created a little different scenario in terms of scheduling events that may have negatively impacted the Silverbacks.
Well, I know we talked about some of the early successes that you had with the attendance, and I would say I was a part of one of those early successes. Having the ability to get introduced to professional soccer, and now you've kind of seen how it's grown, especially with being a 29-year-old myself. I just I'm in love with the game, and I chalk that up to going down there to see the Silverbacks play. And I just wanted to just continue to listen to you and see if any other neat memories that stick out in your mind that you would like to share with our listeners.
Well, to the extent that the Silverbacks had any success at all, I can't emphasize enough how much of impact Gary Hindley had as our first head coach in terms of assembling that first roster. As you pointed out, some of those guys were, we had some national team players. We had, as you mentioned, Sean Nedved, who had played in MLS or wound up playing in MLS. And it was fascinating to watch Gary work and build on his relationships with players to build that Silverbacks team. Now, I will tell you this. One thing I found out pretty quickly, and it sounds trite now, but there's a lot of things that go into a team's success, and team chemistry is one of them. And as we talked about, and I answered your question before about where the players went and where they played, there was a lot of, thrown together rosters. And in those days, there weren't many teams that had a chance to build consistency in terms of familiarity with one another and playing together. And I think that's one of the things that hurt us quality-wise on the field for the Silverbacks. I remember, and Gary coached for us the 2 years at the Gardens, and then we hired George Fernandez, who to this day is still a very close dear friend of mine, as our player coach. Just being around the players, and even though it was truly a minor league sport, they conducted themselves with professionalism. They showed up on time. I don't recall any issues we had. Now, Franklin McIntosh was a bit of a head case, and every once in a while we had to cater a little bit to him. But my memories of the players were always, really good guys, first-rate professionals, and played their hearts out for us. There were some interesting things that happened because we were pretty serious about trying to make the Silverbacks successful. And I told Brad this story that came to mind. The owner of the Cleveland Crunch, and of course he wasn't happy with Gary leaving and coming to coach with us, was a pretty he had a pretty high opinion of himself and his team, and wasn't one of the most popular guys in the league. And he had two superstars playing for him, Hector Marinaro and Zoran Karic. And we decided that, and we were serious about it, it would be a great deal of fun to make a run at trying to acquire Hector Marinara, who at the time was the consensus best player in the NPSL. I went to league meetings, and I guess it was the second year of our operation, with a check made out to the Cleveland Crunch for $100,000 to acquire the rights to Hector Marinara. And I can assure you, at that point, in 96, 97, whenever it was, nobody was throwing around checks for $100,000 for anything in the NPSL. But it was worth the entertainment value to meet with the owner of the Crunch one-on-one and say I had something to discuss with him, and slide the check across the table telling him that I wanted to buy Hector's contract. And Hector knew about it. We had told him, and he was ready to come because he had a great relationship with Gary. And the Cleveland owner literally was speechless. Couldn't even say anything except just kind of sputtered and stuttered a little bit, and then slid the check back across the table and said, Hector's not for sale. It would have been very interesting if he had said, this is great, and grabbed the check and run. It wouldn't have bounced, but that was a big number in those days. That's one of the things I have to chuckle about.
We're hanging out with Rich Neumann, former president of the Cincinnati Silverbacks. And for folks tuning in right now, we've got some trivia for you. If you want a chance to win a Cincinnati Silverbacks shirt courtesy of cincyshirts.com, now's your chance to call in 513-399-KICK, 513-399-KICK. The trivia question we're asking you tonight is the Cincinnati Silverbacks had a very famous, well, it was exciting for us, a very unique pregame ritual when they were announcing players' starting lineups when they would come out onto the field. We want to know, what was that ritual? Again, that trivia question, 513-399-KICK, 513-399-KICK. Boston is standing by waiting to take your call. And for a chance to win a Cincinnati Silverback shirt courtesy of cincyshirts.com.
All right, I had a question for you here, Rich. I know a lot of people are probably interested on the Silverbacks name and the Silverbacks branding. Where does that stand now? Who owns that that name for the team?
Well, like most professional leagues, if not all professional leagues, the marks and the names belong to the league, not just the franchises. So, there was an outdoor soccer team in Atlanta at the time, whatever iteration, USL, whatever it was, that was also the Silverbacks. But my guess is whatever legal entity still exists, if there is one, whatever the shell of the NPSL is, that's where that Silverbacks logo resides. It was never ours.
Very cool.
It was a great name and a great logo, though.
Oh yeah, there's a ton into that, and I mean I remember going down to the games and seeing them awesome jerseys and the crazy colors and everything. So I loved it. Another question is, the Cincinnati Gardens was up for sale, and they auctioned off a lot of memorabilia from the Silverbacks this past fall. I tried to bid on a bunch of things, but for some reason, those were some of the more popular items, and they just went for crazy numbers. Do you have any awesome memorabilia from back in the day?
Well, I've got a lot of game programs and some All-Star game. We hosted the All-Star game one year, and the one year we were at the Crown downtown. I still have my Neumann Silverbacks jersey. But, it's interesting. You mentioned that about the Gardens. I meant to go over when the sale was announced and track down Peter Robinson and just find out what they had. But I didn't do it. And I'm not sure what you're referencing in terms of what they might have had. But I will tell you one story. They had artificial turf from whatever team played there back in the day at the Gardens that we were going to use. And it was stored back of the house. But instead of having steel pipes that supported the wrapped carpet rolls. They had used PVC pipe, probably to save money. So a couple of weeks before our opener, we decided we're finally going to lay the field down. And all of the carpet had stretched. So it had wrinkles and bumps and didn't fit right. I mean, it was a nightmare. And it took us quite a while to tape it together and cut it and piece it together and tamp it down to try to get it to fit the way it needed to be fit. But no, I don't have that much. I actually still have a ball signed by the players who played in the MISL exhibition in probably '88, back at the Coliseum when the Force played there. And one of the oddities of that night, President George W. Bush, or soon to be, or at some point to be President George W. Bush, was in the audience that night at that game, given his relationship with Bill DeWitt and Bob Castellini, who were there as well, owners of the Coliseum.
So now we touched a little bit about some of the difficulties about the club, but could you kind of get into about why it folded after 3 years where we saw some success at the Gardens, but then the transition to the Crown, and why it ended up folding after 3 years?
Well, the easy answer is we weren't drawing enough people and selling enough tickets and selling enough sponsorships to keep it going. And that's part of the story. I alluded to the fact that with the Cyclones taking the lion's share of the Good Friday and Saturday night dates, and the Nederlander organization, for obvious reasons, wanted to make sure that those prime dates were available for non-sporting events, concerts specifically. We did have a logjam in terms of good dates to schedule the Silverbacks games on. The reality is we didn't make money. We lost money, not a lot in the total scheme of things. And I really felt that given the family demographics and our attractiveness to certain sponsors, we could continue to grow the fan base. And I mean, the reality is, I didn't immediately, but I ultimately fell on my sword, because the decision that finally buried the Silverbacks, and this is something that very few people remember, there was a new startup professional basketball league called the International Basketball League. The Cincinnati stuff. And without naming names, some of Doug's and my partners, and I was a minority partner and everything, so I got to voice my opinion, but I wasn't going to rule the day. We're completely enamored with basketball. And they were convinced that the Cincinnati stuff and the IBL were going to be a much more lucrative business opportunity than the Cincinnati Silverbacks and the NPSL. And when that decision was made, and Doug Kirchhoffer and I are still very good friends. I just spoke to him a couple weeks ago. We stay in touch. When that decision was made, that really it spelled the end for me in terms of my ongoing participation in my second tour of duty at the Coliseum /Crown/US Bank Arena. So that was really what did it. To this day, I'm not sure if we had really given it all the time and attention that it needed. The Silverbacks couldn't have. Now, again, the league folded, and you got to have a league to play in. But we certainly had a few more miles to go before I think it would have come to an end. But it wasn't. It was a decision that was based not entirely on the lack of success of the Silverbacks, not at all. In fact, you guys tell me. FC Cincinnati's success obviously has blown everybody away, far exceeded anybody's expectations and probably wildest dreams. And I'm not suggesting that indoor soccer should make a comeback, but the climate today is so much different than it was 20 years ago in that regard with respect to soccer. And the city's frankly very different than it was 20 years ago. But I'm thrilled with the success that FC Cincinnati has had. And I know Jeff Birding, and I know some people in the organization. In fact, I share with Brad, I have not met him personally yet, but the high school that I played for back in Jersey was in the same conference at Kearney High School. I went to Bloomfield High School. Kearney High School, where John Harkes graduated from, was in our same conference. Now, I played against the generation of soccer players at Kearney before John Harkes, but I would love and I hope to get a chance to meet John at some point so we can compare notes and I can tell him how Bloomfield always beat Kearney back in the day.
Rich, I'm interested to hear from you kind of what you're up to now. And you alluded to the financing of stadiums a little bit earlier publicly. Do you have any opinion on like kind of the environment for that type of thing, public versus private, currently, as?
Well, yeah, my career has gone off in a slightly different trajectory from team ownership. So I alluded to being in minor league baseball before. I was part of the ownership group of Mandalay Sports Entertainment / Mandalay Baseball Properties. And between the late 90s, early 2000s, when I joined the group, to just a few years ago, we owned and operated 11 different affiliated minor league teams, never more than 7 at once, but a total of 11. And our flagship franchise was the Dayton Dragons. When our principal owners back in 2012 decided to sell our portfolio of teams, I wound up working with a firm that had done a lot of work for us, meaning Mandalay, in terms of putting public-private partnerships together to build minor league ballparks, which was in large part one of my responsibilities at Mandalay. But the firm, Brailsford and Dunleavy, based out of Washington, D.C., is tied into and works for what used to be the Washington, D.C. Events and Sports Commission, now Events D.C., and represented the city of Washington, D.C. throughout the entire Expos move to D.C. and the renovation of RFK Stadium and then the building of Nationals Park. And also, most recently, represented Events D.C. / City of Washington, D.C. on the D.C. United Buzzards Point MLS stadium deal. So while I wasn't directly involved in that, I've been involved in these public-private partnership discussions and projects for quite some time and have a window into the MLS model for stadiums. And it's all part of the public record, so I'm not giving away any deep, dark secrets, but the model is pretty simple. A new state-of-the-art soccer-specific stadium is going to cost somewhere between $200 and $300 million, depending upon the level of bells and whistles. The DC United Events DC deal is the public sector provided the land, the infrastructure, and then it was up to the team, and is up to the team as it's coming out of the ground now, to build the stadium. So, $150 million for the land, the infrastructure, everything that goes into preparing the site to build it vertically, and then the team's responsible for another $150 million for the stadium itself. So when you're talking about MLS soccer-specific stadiums, and again, it's pretty broad range, but $200, $300 million. I mean, that's what they cost, and that that's a big number. and a lot depends on what the value of the land is and what's it going to take to get that property ready to build on. And then the expansion fee for an MLS franchise is, and what I hear is, the $200 million is there to scare away people who aren't serious, but 150 gets it done. I'm not sure you're not scaring the same people away at 150 versus 200, but so you're talking about, approaching numbers that are, pushing $500 million to acquire an MLS franchise and build a soccer-specific stadium. And even if you did it on the low end, it's still a lot of money. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next wave of expansion opportunities with respect to FC Cincinnati.
Do you think there's still an environment there across the country for some of these public private partnerships, or do you think from what we're going to see here on out is mostly going to have to be private based finance stadiums?
The public sector is drying up, if it hasn't dried up completely. Now every situation is different. Every market has its own unique characteristics. So depending upon where you are, I'm working on a minor league ballpark project right now in the city of North Carolina, and their public sector leaders are 100% united in, we're going to fund this ballpark and we're going to make this happen as a catalyst for economic development. That's a rarity. So if you want to extrapolate from that, where we are in Cincinnati right now, and I don't have a crystal ball any more than anybody else does, but you guys know what the climate's like in Cincinnati in terms of, the public sector contributing to any significant sports facility or sports and entertainment facility projects. So, and that's not to suggest that the ownership group of FC Cincinnati doesn't have a lot of political sway in a lot of different ways. So that can't be disregarded, but it's a lot of heavy lifting to get significant public sector funding for those types of projects these days.
Rich,
and this is my editorial comment, and I've had this conversation with, not a lot of people, but those that, pay attention to this kind of stuff. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I suspect it's going to be very, very difficult, forgetting other circumstances and other conditions and issues, for FC Cincinnati to get an MLS franchise without building a soccer-specific stadium. I just don't see Nippert Stadium as a long-term solution in that regard. And I think that's probably the message that Don Garber delivered pretty pointedly in his trip here.
Yeah, he mentioned that in the town hall. That's just one man's opinion. I don't have any official insight. Well, speaking of FC Cincinnati, we'll get you out of here on this, because we've mentioned it many times on the show about how we were all somewhat surprised at the success was from a box office standpoint with FC Cincinnati this year, knowing that soccer in the Queen City has historically come and gone. What is it like to see FC Cincinnati succeed here in Cincinnati? And do you think that this kind of team, this kind of franchise will last long term?
Well, my first response is I am absolutely thrilled. And I couldn't be happier for the ownership group. I couldn't be happier for the organization, for the front office staff, for the coach and the players, the trainers, everybody. I just think it's fantastic. And your adjective of being somewhat surprised, I think, is understated a little bit, but that's okay. The proof is in the pudding, and you get one opening season, and it better be successful, because that usually portends future success. I think the other message that Don Garber delivered was, okay, we get it. can you sustain it? And that's where the rubber meets the road. Players are going to come and go. I saw and forgive me, but I'm not going to remember the name offhand, but the FC Cincinnati's best player, signed with, I think, New York.
Yeah, Sean
in
O'Coley.
MLS. So the players are going to come and go. The affinity has to be with the club. I've been fascinated by its success. Cincinnati is a much different city than it was 20 years ago. I personally am very optimistic that even at the USL level, and I'm not minimizing that because those guys are good. I think the success of FC Cincinnati is here to stay. Maybe not at the level it is right now, because my experience with some of the most successful minor league baseball teams is there's a 1 to 3 year honeymoon period, so to speak, and then it kind of comes down and flattens out. But I have a great deal of confidence in Jeff and the people that are running the organization from the business side in terms of selling tickets and sponsorships and keeping the fan interest there. The MLS, I think that's a long putt. And the other thing that comes with the upfront money in terms of the franchise expansion fee and the soccer specific stadium money is you're going to have to charge much different ticket prices, and your concessions prices are going to have to keep pace. And that's when you find out how valuable the property is in terms of the fan experience, the loyalty to the club, and what people make decisions about in terms of their discretionary spending dollars. So I hate to end on, because I love soccer and I want to see it succeed, but at the end of the day, it's a business, and the owners have to make decisions based on their internal rate of return. And that's what ultimately the future of FC Cincinnati is going to be driven by.
No, it's a good point, and it's something I'm sure that the front office staff and ownership is certainly studying and trying to do some research on to find out what their next steps are. It's going to be an interesting next few years for FC Cincinnati. There's no question about it. Rich, we certainly appreciate you taking the time. I speak on behalf of all fans of soccer in the Cincinnati area, and of course Brad, Brian, and Joseph here on the show as well. We thank you for introducing professional soccer to a lot of us. And we really do appreciate you spending some time with us to talk Silverbacks with us.
It's been my pleasure, and anything I can do, anytime you'd like me to come back to further the cause of soccer in Cincinnati, happy to do so. It's been great, and I really commend you for. I have to make an honest confession. I had to ask one of the younger guys I work with now what a podcast is. And how I might get a hold of the iTunes download or the YouTube, whatever it is. But when Brad and I first teed this up, and I'm not even sure how he really tracked me down to start with, but it's great to know that there's that many fans out there and people that are passionate enough about soccer and FC Cincinnati to not only support FC Cincinnati, but to drag an old guy like me out to talk about the Silverbacks from 20 years ago. So I appreciate it more than you can imagine.
Well, thank you, Rich. We appreciate it. Happy holidays, and hopefully we'll hear from you again soon.
Thanks very much, guys. Take care, and happy holidays to everybody.
Thanks, Rich.
All right. That's
Thanks,
Rich Neumann, former president of the Cincinnati Silverbacks, joining us here on Cincinnati Soccer Talk. Of course, we asked a trivia question a little bit ago regarding the Cincinnati Silverbacks pregame ritual. Let's go to Brian, who's on the line. Brian, welcome to Cincinnati Soccer Talk. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing okay. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. You got an answer for us? Well, first, let me ask the question. The question was, what was the Cincinnati Silverbacks pregame ritual as far as getting players out onto the field, the chance to win a Cincinnati Silverbacks shirt courtesy of cincyshirts.com? Brian, what is your answer?
my answer is they land on the field through an inflatable silverback head.
Spots on 100%. Give it up for Brian. That's right. They ran through the gorilla head, the silverback head, right on the field. Congrats, Brian! You win a shirt courtesy of cincyshirts.com, and of course, we'll get your information and congratulations.
Yeah. By the way, just wanted to say thank you guys for doing this show. I've enjoyed watching it and listening to Rich. Was very informative. It was fun to go down a little history lesson on soccer in Cincinnati.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you tuning in each and every week, Brian. You're the man, and we'll hope to see you again soon at a upcoming FC Cincinnati game.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
All right, that's Brian on the line, giving us a ring. Congrats to him. Getting that shirt from cincyshirts.com. We appreciate them giving us that shirt to give away this week. All right, let's hang out with Jono on the line. Jono, what's up, man?
Nick, how are you, dude?
I'm doing great. How about you, buddy?
I'm good. I'm actually I'm at a concert right now, and I heard you guys were talking Silverbacks, and I said, if there's a step break, I'm going to call in, and sure enough, it worked out.
Okay, so what concert are you at?
I came to see, what's his name? King Curtis? I don't even fucking know.
Whoa!
I don't even know.
Well, we're going to be beeping that out.
I'm just glad I didn't drop the first F-bomb on the show.
I came to see Marcus King Band, and the opener was awesome. They're actually, I think it's called the Magic Lightning Boys. They're a Cincinnati band. They were sweet.
All right. So where are you? Where is this concert at?
20th Century.
Oh, okay, cool.
What kind of music is this?
Dude, the first band was called, I think the genre was Swamp Rock Blues.
All right.
And I have to say, that's an accurate assessment of what it was. It was awesome.
So you wanted to talk Silverbacks while you had a minute there.
Yeah, dude. I love the Silverbacks. I grew up going to some of their games. That was one of the few professional, if not professional, soccer avenues we had as a young kid in Cincinnati.
What was your favorite memory?
So my friends and I, we grew up playing for the Sycamore Arsenal, one of the club teams, and him and our dads would always go to games. And whenever the Silverbacks scored a goal, we would jump out in the aisle and do the disco, and we would always be on the jumbotron every game.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's hysterical.
It was amazing. It was such a fun time because indoor soccer is crazy enough, but having the 2-pointers and everything, that was so cool.
Very cool. That's awesome. Well
done.
done.
I don't know if you guys remember, they also gave out like little white soccer balls sometimes, these little white like bouncy Silverback soccer balls. I used to have like a few of them. I wish I still had them around. They were nice Silverback relics.
That is cool. Do you still have it?
I wish, man. No, I was at my brother's earlier, and he had a ball just like it, but it was a UK basketball, and I was just hoping for a second, just a split second, please.
Oh, man.
Silverback.
Now, Jono was one of the all-stars for the supporters group Derby versus Louisville. So next year, I'm going to encourage Jono to get some Silverbacks jerseys, and we can represent with them next year versus Louisville, or maybe even a little fun one versus Dayton because they kind of shared that rivalry name as well.
Wow, that is a very nice gesture. You calling me an all-star and everything, but let's be honest here. Brendan O'Brien was the all-star. I was a participant. I appreciate the love, though.
That's
I
awesome.
Love you, Jono. We love you.
Dude, hopefully next year we continue it, and that'd be really cool if Indy comes in the USL, which whenever that stuff's going to happen, that'd be cool to find that out. That'd be sweet if we could play them, too. By the way, since you guys are the soccer gurus of the USL, do you have any idea, any indication about, like, when when all these teams are going to come into the USL officially?
I don't think anybody knows anything. Right. I mean, we keep hearing all these different rumors, all this. I mean, last week we ended the show saying that Indy was going to be joining USL, and then it's been a week and we haven't heard anything else.
Well, I want to say that didn't they come up with an arbitrary deadline of this Friday the 16th for an announcement?
They did.
Yeah, so I think you're going to hear. I would venture to say you're going to hear who's coming, but I doubt we'll hear if there's going to be 2 conferences, 3 conferences. I think it's going to take some time to get the schedule in place. We'll probably hear about that schedule end of January, but I think we kind of had a nice 4 or 5 days where we didn't have to hear about the Cosmos throwing up on themselves. But now I think that it's going to hit the fan starting tomorrow, definitely Thursday.
Okay, sweet. Nice, man. Well, I hope so. I'm curious to find out all this, and I'm sure you guys will inform all of us.
That's what we're here for, Jono.
Well, I appreciate it, boys. I got to go catch the second set. Next time I call in, I will tell you about it, all right?
Awesome. We appreciate it, buddy. Don't be a stranger.
I won't, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Take it easy. That's Jono. Bringing out the explicit rating on the iTunes listing this week. I'm just kidding. We'll bleep that one out. Jono's the man. We appreciate him giving us a ring here while he was at his concert. Before we get out of here, let's talk a little MLS Cup, shall we? It was an interesting game. It finished 0-0. Stefan Fry made probably the greatest save in MLS Cup history, maybe the greatest save in MLS history, to keep that game knotted up at 0 in the extra time period. It ended up being the Seattle Sounders winning in penalty kicks. Brian Weigel, you host an MLS show. First of all, what is the name of that show? You never pimp it on here. What is the name of that show?
Watching MLS, WATCHIN MLS with the Ginger and Joe. So no, we're fun once a week kind of podcast. We're actually going to be covering a lot tonight, and actually we'll probably be recording that in about 15 minutes. So pretty exciting. Overall, the game, a lot of people are dissing it across the board, and it wasn't a beautiful display, but it's kind of the MO for both those teams is stout defense, physical defenders, and both coaches game plan to mark out the best player, with Giovinco getting marked out and Altidore honestly getting manned up versus Valdez, and then on the opposite side, the Toronto FC just really keyed on Ladero, so that's kind of shut down the entire game. And if Josie would have scored that goal in the 20th minute or whatever it was, I think that
had a chance like in the second minute.
Yeah. I mean, I think that would have been huge and would have changed the entire game. But overall, not the best display. But hell, my dad even said, like, hey, I randomly just turned on Fox and I watched the game. It was kind of cool. So I think they said like 4 million people total watched the game versus the United States and Canada. So that alone is absolutely spectacular for the sport in the continent.
I know you're a big MLS guy, Joseph. What'd you make of the final?
It was so hard to enjoy it just because I really have a strong disposition against both teams, and I ended up rooting for Toronto and they lost. But it's there is as like Brian said, there are people who didn't really like the metrics of how the match went, but there is something with its own charm of having it come down to PKs. I know that's not how a lot of people want to see a trophy won, but as far as suspense goes, I mean, a 5 PK, like, it doesn't get any more suspenseful than that. So by that token, I did really enjoy it, although I don't know if I want to live in a world where the Sounders have trophies in their trophy case. I was enjoying watching it get dusty. But
not only do they have a trophy in their trophy case, but they won a game in which they did not register a single shot on goal. First time in MLS Cup history. That's scary too. But you got to give them credit defensively. They shut down Giovinco, who was a non-factor. Josie had some chances here and there. I was like Joseph. I was rooting for Toronto FC as well because I wanted our Cincinnati boy Nick Haglund to bring home MLS Cup. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But congrats to the Sounders. They had their parade today, and then the parade trolley ended up hitting a police officer and injuring him. I mean, come on.
Ran over him, I guess. He got pinned down or something.
Oh, that's horrible.
I know. I agree. But anyway, what did you make of the match, Brad?
It wasn't a USL Cup
He's a
Did I say
USL.
USL? I meant MLS Cup.
He's a
No,
USL.
no, no. USL Cup was way more interesting than that MLS Cup.
Oh.
And by the way, Michael Bradley, hit that penalty with your purse next time, bro. Come on. That was horrible. I mean, for the captain of his team and the U.S. team, come on. People have to take an issue with how much of a wussy shot that was. I mean, I don't want to say it's a family show, but sack up, son. Come on. You saw Ladero put that in the back of the net. Most of those guys, I mean, the center back who won the damn thing made it easy. And Michael Bradley, arguably the best player in the U.S. at this time, hits a 5-mile roller that, even you could have stopped, Soups.
Wow.
Hot take.
Whoa, wrecked.
I agree with you 100%. And in fact, if you go back and look at the conversation we were having during the match, after that penalty kick was hit, I immediately said this guy needs to have his U.S. men's national team position revoked. I mean, that was horrible. I mean, it was not even close. Granted, I know he just ran 120 minutes in freezing cold temperatures and probably was pretty tired, but this is the MLS Cup. I mean, you're a DP. You're a captain. I mean, you have got to bury that shot. Yeah. And I guess, in hindsight, why would you take Giovinco out? You're going to penalties. You need somebody who's going to put the ball in the net. So that was even more surprising. And I know he wasn't giving you anything down the stretch, but I don't know. That was pretty horrendous. But yeah.
Jonah's got to call more often, man. He's got me all fired up. Like I want to listen to some Swamp Rock Blues.
Yeah. And it's funny. I was watching the game with my kids, and Justin Morrow, he stepped up for Toronto in that 6th penalty kick, and he had that look on his face like he was about to wet the bed. And I told my son, I was like, he's going to miss this. And sure enough, he clanked it off the crossbar. So you could tell by looking at the players' faces when they walk up who's ready and who's not. And Morrow was definitely one of those faces like, oh, man, I got to take a kick. So, hey, congrats to the Seattle Sounders. They are MLS Cup champs. If you're Stiggy Schmidt, who was fired mid-year, you got to think to yourself, well, wait a minute. Well, that's not fair. But kudos. And even Clint Dempsey, they win a cup without him. It's got to be salt in the wounds as well. So love to get your thoughts, though, fans. Cincy Soccer Talk at spnt.tv is the email address. All right, it's time to get out of here. Episode 44 is about to wrap up. Your final thoughts, Josef Sagai.
It's great to be back. Great to be back in the swing of things. I'm honestly so happy Jono was the first one to have a slip like that, because that's been my biggest fear on this podcast for 44 episodes, and I've made it. So now I won't be remembered as the first when I hopefully never make that mistake. But all in all, great to be back, and it was good to reminisce with Rich. It's actually fun. My pops was he was talking about the Cosmos earlier, and that was one of the first sporting events my dad ever went to when he came to this country, was a Cosmos game with when Pele was there. So
pretty cool. Next we'll go to Brian Siri Weigel. Brian, your final thoughts?
Hate you.
Hey, me, you're the one who did it.
Accidentally. I know, man. I was telling my other co-host, hey, you got to wait. This is more important. So come on now. So there you go.
I like it.
So I got 2 things, actually. We did have a caption it on our Twitter today on the 2 pictures side by side of the Minnesota United and the Atlanta, whatever they call themselves, United FC plus whatever. The 2 pictures of the draft rooms. The Atlanta club was, big oak room with a huge table and 4 guys sitting posed. And then the Minnesota boardroom had 6 slep rocks around the phone with their laptops out, iPads, and a box of open donuts. So that was cool. So I actually had this is going to be a little off soccer related. I kind of changed my mind here. I had a entry from Kyle Ryder at Nimbus_Racing. He captured it as you versus the guy she tells you not to worry about. So I dig it. A little outside the box thinking there. There's a bunch of really, really good ones. So I think we're gonna try to keep that going. Another part here, wrap it up. I want to give a shout out to I think it's Harpo's FC or FC Harpo's. They're out in Colorado. They're a USSSA, which is essentially the highest level of amateur league you can play in across the country. And actually, they've advanced, I think, to the second or third round of the U.S. Open Cup. I want to say they played either the Rapids or the Switchbacks 2 years ago. And they're extremely successful, one of the best amateur clubs in the country, and they actually declined jumping up to a professional NPSL invitation this week, or actually today. So just want people to think about that. What's actually best for your club? Really think about it. I love that people are actually looking about what is in their overall best interest, for their supporters and for their club. So definitely keep an eye out that and see how that can apply for FC Cincinnati. But overall, a lot of big stuff going on this week. Keep checking out the big board.
Good stuff. And check out Watching MLS, Brian's other podcast he cheats on us with. I'm just kidding, Brian. Check it out. You can find him on iTunes and anywhere else podcasts are found.
We are an official MLS podcast. They did put us on their list, so that's kind of cool.
Very cool. Good stuff. Final thoughts, Brad Weigel.
I don't know. I'm still a fan of Evan Villelas. I think he's a Bethlehem Steel fan. He wrote, "Pictured on the left, NASL in January. On the right, November."
Ouch.
But no, I don't know if you guys have talked about leagues combining and also MLS expansion. But Don Garber's having a big announcement Thursday about the expansion requirements, which we'll be covering here on the site, and also check out on Twitter because it's really going to affect our future here. But one of the things that kind of breaking news this week and about a club that we haven't really talked about too much that I could see coming into MLS, and that's Phoenix. And why Phoenix? It's hot as heck in the summer, but Diplo is one of the owners of the USL franchise, and I found out on Grant Wall's podcast this week that Don Garber, of all people, is a huge electronic dance music fan. So all you EDM people out there, feel free to send your best songs to Uncle Don, and also if they want some more info, they should visit mls2phoenix.com for some funny stuff.
I love Diplo. That's why he's my boy. We saw him in concert, Brad, didn't we? Club XOs.
Yeah.
mls2phoenix.com.
Can you just imagine Don Garber like at an EDM club with his hand up in the air, just dancing like he doesn't care?
Wow. I think that's our cue to get out of here. This is a really good episode. Thanks to Brad for organizing and getting us hooked up with Rich Neumann, former president of the Cincinnati Silverbacks. I thought it was good to get some perspective on soccer in the Queen City and where its roots are. And for a lot of us FC Cincinnati fans, it started right with the Cincinnati Silverbacks. So it was good to catch up with him and, kind of reminisce about the old glory days of soccer back in the mid-'90s. So good stuff there. Don't forget you can support our show, CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/support. And help things like our phone line, our hosting, that sort of thing. Believe it or not, this show does cost money.
Heck yeah.
And this is the time for giving. So please, if you have some spare change laying around, CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/support. A little help goes a long way, and we really do appreciate it. Don't forget, we do record this show live every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern at CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/live. But if you can't make our live show, you can always download our audio on demand. We're on iTunes, Google, Stitcher. An iTunes review would be greatly appreciated as well. We're still stuck on 28. CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/iTunes is the address to find us there if you got an iOS device. So cool stuff as well. All right, so it's time to get out of here. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Cincinnati Soccer Talk is an SPNT production. For more information about our other podcasts, log on to spnt.tv. And to get the latest and greatest surrounding FC Cincinnati, the USL, even MLS expansion, log on to CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com. So for the Weigel twins, Brad and Brian, and Yosef, I'm Subes, reminding you to watch your tackles, and we'll catch up with you next week.